Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back, ladies and gents. Another week has gone by, and your two favourite quantum physicists, we're back with you. That's right, I'm the co-host tonight, Kev Baker, and you are in the right place at the right time for the Anthony Patch Show. And as the theme music says there, Anthony Patch definitely is the man in the know. So let's waste no time tonight. You ain't here to hear me. Tony, how you doing, man?
Very good, Dr. Baker. How's Dr. Baker feeling these days?
Dr. Baker is feeling rather good today. Raring to go, Tony. I've been looking forward to this show all night. In particular, especially when you informed me that the brilliant David Heavener, our friend, is going to be back with us in hour number 2, right?
He is. David Heavener is a Hollywood producer, and he has produced over 40 films in his history. We've had him on a couple of times. We're going to speak with him in the second hour about his upcoming television series, The Last Evangelist. And it is kind of it's a crime. It's a CSI based on a Christian theme, a Christian genre, if you will, but an intriguing concept, not only because it's Christian-based, but because he's really trying to make it a realistic television series in terms of the characters and what they represent, their morals, their struggles. I want to call it something that is more like a docudrama, perhaps, is the way I would look at it.
Yeah, almost like a kind of reality drama.
Yeah, that's a better way to say it, or more of a reality drama. Yeah.
Every time he comes on, Anthony, I mean, I'm always blown away because obviously he's working tirelessly on The Last Evangelist, and we get a little more each time he comes on. And I don't know about any of the listeners out there. I mean, everyone knows I like to go and absorb the programming from that square box at the end of the room, the television. And, you know, a show like David is putting together is utterly unique. We've all seen these crime dramas, but never with the spin that David's putting on it. And at this time we're living in now, Tony, it could never be more timely.
Yeah, he has invited you and myself to be technical, I don't want to say experts, but advisors to the television series, because he really wants to incorporate high technology into the storylines. And so it is very timely. It's very up to date and modern. And in that respect, we have a venue, Kev, you and I, to take to an entirely new audience the information that we've been sharing that would never see the light of day on a mainstream media television show. And so he is taking the step of setting up a network, and he will be broadcasting on Roku TV, Amazon, Android. So he is really putting together as a content provider himself, but also bringing in other people that have content that are subject matter experts for shows in which they will be sharing educational information as well as entertainment. So it's really a good mix, and I applaud him for his tireless efforts in pulling together an independent network for television purposes. And there's a natural marriage, if you will, of TFR, thanks to Chris Geo and his generosity and his collaboration with David Heavener in providing content from TFR over to the David Heavener television network, as it is entitled, the David Heavener TV. So this is going to be really an excellent evolution for TFR as well.
It really is. And I mean, you know, I watch a lot of these B-movie disaster films and stuff like that. And there's a lot of the stuff, especially the science that we talk about. However, when you start to dig into the detail, they never quite have it right. So it's really encouraging to see that David is going to such lengths, not just on the technology with us, Tony, but other people he's calling on too, to get the very cutting edge information and have that in his actual series as well.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll share some more with us today, later on in the show. We have some other things to cover, so we'll let David speak for himself, but we're just letting you know, as a very informed and educated audience, that we greatly appreciate that there's more coming your way that Kevin and I are honored to be a part of. And so that's kind of the teaser, but I'm sure we'll fill you in more as it progresses.
So, Tony, where are we starting tonight? Because let's face it, we can take our pick. There's so much going on in the world right now. So I'm going to hand it over to you to see just where we're going to go with this.
Well, there is. And, it's a great time to be in radio, a great time to be in television, because there's nothing lacking for content. The subject matter out there can't get any more dramatic, and certainly not any more tragic than what we've been seeing with these hurricanes. And now we had an 8.4 earthquake just off the coast in the southern portion of Mexico last night. So,
well, I'm going to blow your trumpet for you.
Okay.
And I'll let you
do that. Go ahead.
I'll reconnect you, Tony, because you've kind of lagged out a little bit there. But yeah, just during the week there. Now, as you know, Anthony Patch is very much my mentor, and we had noticed these big X9, X10 type flares coming off the sun. Now, I'd been listening to our good friend Clyde Lewis, and a poor listener had phoned up in a bit of a panic because they'd been watching YouTube, and I believe they lived in the Florida region, and one of these YouTubers was absolutely putting the fear of God into them because they were making out that these solar flares would absolutely supercharge an already monster storm. So I took to the email. I thought, I know who I'll ask about this, Mr. Patch. And he came back to me, and his very first 2 words, or 4 words, shall I say, was more tectonic in nature. Now, he went on to explain a lot more after that, Anthony, but obviously, after today's 8.1 earthquake in Mexico, I think you're very justified to have gone the tectonic route as opposed to it supercharging any storm.
Yeah, and I think it's just looking at the basic physics. If we look at particle physics, which is what we're really discussing when we're looking at flares coming off of the sun, these are charged particles, primarily protons. Yeah, they're gamma rays and X-rays and ultraviolet rays that are increased, but charged particles that are streaming off the sun. And interestingly enough, as they come off the sun in an Earth-directed flare, which is what we experienced in the X class, we're looking at particles that actually accelerate the further they get from the sun. And that is because Earth's own electromagnetic, not gravitational, attraction of these charged particles, the protons, because the Earth primarily is of a negative charge, and a negative attracts a positive. So the protons accelerate off the sun towards the Earth in these flaring and CME activities, and they actually penetrate to the core of the planet. And when they penetrate to the core, they cause a friction to occur. The charged particles interact with the core and heat the core. When you heat the core, you're expanding the planet, much like a balloon inflating. Therefore, the surface of the planet begins to expand, and you have a separation of the tectonic plates. And that's what I was anticipating happening with this recent X flare, and that's pretty much what happened.
And just before the show, just briefly, because I know you've got so much to get into, Anthony, but I'm sure a lot of the listeners have seen this as well, a really strange light show above Mexico during this earthquake. Wouldn't you say?
That was, and thank you for sharing it with me. And I would attribute much of it, because it was in the atmosphere, it was in the cloud cover. I actually will go to say that most of what we saw as static discharges in the cloud cover was not so much due to tectonic activity, but I'm going to say that it was charged particles. That's part of it, part of the X flare. But the other is HAARP, because the pattern of those appeared to me to be more HAARP-induced. And so I'm just going to put the conjecture out there. I label it as conjecture. I have nothing to back it up. I'm just saying that I believe this earthquake was a mixture of the flare activity and HAARP, because certainly we're seeing ground-based discharges taking place. Some of it are just electrical transformers that are exploding, literally, the blue discharges. But I think they took advantage of the X flare, perhaps even anticipating it, flipped HAARP on, because I do, and I'm going to go, and venture out there and say that I think that HAARP has something to do with these hurricanes in terms of inducing them and steering them. But without going down that rabbit hole too far, I do think HAARP played a role in this 8.1, 8.4 trigger that took place. It was a shallow one. It was about, correct me on the depth, Kev, but I think it was between 26 and 30 miles below the surface. And that's pretty much in the range of HAARP. HAARP is 10 kilometers, typical thumbprint, but it can be, fairly shallow, which is what this one was.
And like I was saying to you, Anthony, I mean, if I'm putting my nefarious hat on and I'm wanting to use something like HAARP, what a perfect time to do it, because people such as myself and a lot of other people out there will attribute this earthquake solely to the solar activity that's been going on, and rightly so. It's almost as if they've kind of done it at the perfect time to disguise their actions.
Yeah, it's a great way to disguise and to piggyback and to compound the effects. And, we're talking Tesla technology. Tesla with the sun naturally occurring, and we have the ionized gas that makes up the areas of space, the void of space, so to speak. And that's a conductive medium. It's the ether, as Tesla calls it. And then you have HAARP, which is Tesla technology. And then you have the natural expansion of the tectonic plates that are releasing gases that also contribute to these discharges that we see in the atmosphere, low-level atmosphere, cloud cover atmosphere in the case of Mexico City area, south of Mexico City, I should say. But, the big thumbprint for me, someone in chat here, FRGEDTDT, said 22 miles in depth. So, that's in the range of HAARP. And anytime you get a shallow quake like that and you get these discharges in the atmosphere, it just screams HAARP at me. I wish we had Alana Freeland with us right now, because she would be all over this for us.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, usually I look for that 10-kilometer depth, that sweet spot. But like Tony says here, I mean, anything that is relatively shallow, we can kind of factor in a potential for HAARP. It doesn't seem to affect these really deep down earthquakes that we see from time to time. But especially if you see 10 kilometers or 6.21 miles, that for me definitely, it's like the signature, Tony.
It is. And so I'm going to bring in a piece of scripture. Matthew 24, verse 10. Then he said unto them, Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines, and pestilences, and fearful sights, and great signs shall there be from heaven. Now, that's quite appropriate for our days here. I'm going to go down to Matthew 25. And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. If the world's populations ever needed those verses, they need them today, because if people have not come around and realized what's going on this planet and realize that they need to turn to Jesus Christ, they need to turn to God, our Creator, I don't know what else, but the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel and some things along the lines of Matthew and Mark, they tell us that these things are going to get worse. Now, I'm not fear-mongering, and neither is Kev. I'm simply saying that Scripture lays out just what we're seeing now, and that it is going to ramp up. These are the birth pangs, and I would venture to say that, I'll go so far as to say perhaps the dilation, I'm not trying to be too touchy here, but the dilation's at 10 centimeters and the head is beginning to crown. And it is not a heavenly crown, Revelation 12, yet, but it will be on the 23rd of September. Go ahead, my friend. Now,
Tony, just going back to the chat room here, because we like to keep it interactive, and Val's got a point here, and she says that she actually thinks that HAARP might well have been trying to stop the CME that was coming in. Now, I would say that HAARP in itself, charging and heating the upper ionosphere and things, I don't think that would be a protective cover against a CME, but I could be wrong. What do you think to that?
No, if anything, it will weaken by virtue of heating the ionosphere 100 miles roughly above the surface of the Earth. It would weaken our shields. It would disturb the magnetosphere and the plasmasphere that are naturally blocking those charged particles from a CME or from a flare. So HAARP is not a defensive tool. It is strictly for modification of the atmosphere and also for the inducement, the induction, if you will, according to Tesla, of earthquakes.
Absolutely. And, we've got the earthquake that's happened. We've got these storms, and something that not many people have mentioned, and Val just posted an absolutely astounding picture in the chat there. And it's of these fires that are raging throughout the US as well, Tony.
Yeah, here in my area of the United States, we're not seeing really any media coverage, and even the national broadcasts are not really, covering these fires. Now, that's a ridiculous picture. There are people on the golf course playing golf, and in the background, the near background, maybe it's Photoshop, but the near background, the whole hillside's on fire. All of the eucalyptus trees and whatnot. Well, those are golfers. Sorry if anybody in the audience are golfers, but golfers are ridiculous. What a waste of time. Sorry, that's my opinion. But if you're standing there and there's a raging fire behind you, that pretty much sums up my attitude towards people who play golf. And sorry, golfers.
People may say, and they'll say this is fear-mongering, like you mentioned before, but I think it would be remiss of us and almost, bad of us not to point out that these are the times that we're moving into. And if everything's to be believed, Anthony, this is just the start of it, because things will ramp up from here on in.
It is. It is just going to continue to ramp up, and you can't get used to it. So I'm not saying just get used to it. It's going to get worse, because there is none. It's just by definition, as things get worse, you can't get used to it. Yeah, let's talk about Portland a little bit. There are major fires burning along the west coast of the United States, and the largest fire that the LA area has ever had has been burning for several days. Portland up into the Washington area has their share. Been now, I don't know, about 10 days in Montana. They've had this huge fire going there. Don't even see it. Don't even see it covered in the mainstream, because everybody's focused on the hurricanes, which I understand, but still, if you're being burned out of your home, that's no different than being flooded out of your home. You're still losing your home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did I lose you?
Yeah. No, I was just thinking there, because I think it was last week we had Kathleen on, and, she was making a good point about all of these kind of disasters that are happening. I hate to call it a good point, because we've often now, especially Kathleen and yourself, have been talking about this point of anguish that you have to reach, Anthony. And with the kind of stuff that people are going to be going through in the next couple of weeks in these affected areas, that will be enough to bring a lot of people to their knees, right?
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up. I was listening to a pastor 2 days ago who was saying, from the Texas area, that there are literally, from his reports, hundreds upon hundreds of people coming to the Lord. Now, I applaud that. That's exactly the point. Pay attention to what's going on and understand who's in control. I just hope that they are, long-lived relationships, that they do actually turn to the Lord and accept Jesus Christ as their Savior, and that they do have the Holy Spirit, and that they continue to develop that relationship. It's not a Band-Aid. It's not, get on your knees and pray because it's 9/11, which is coming up on Monday. Or, you've got a hurricane or a huge fire rolling through. Yeah, turn to the Lord, but make it long term. Don't make it just a Band-Aid when you're in dire straits.
No, you're right there. Although it was a kind of dire straits that led me down this path, Tony, I must admit. When you're faced with that kind of mortality issue, it certainly makes you reconsider your position and where to put your faith. Yeah.
And so let me take another verse here, just since you prompted that. Looking at Matthew 24, verse 34. And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. For as a snare shall it come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. Watch ye therefore and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. I mean, that really sums it up. Get off the golf course, turn off the football, basketball, and baseball, and realize that this world is under the control and within the plan of God himself. We are just this little blue marble spinning through space, and we are insignificant in the scope and scale of the universe, and certainly even within our own solar system. So I just urge people, realize that man is not in control. Man doesn't have all the answers. AI certainly doesn't have all the answers and never will. It's utter folly. And God looks down upon us from heaven and laughs at the folly of mankind. All righty?
There you go.
He has a sense of humor, by the way.
Oh, he absolutely does. It was Joe Joseph that taught me that. And he's never spoken a truer word as our Joe. And Joe will even be joining us over on Freaky Friday tonight. So put a note in your diary for that one. I know it's almost like, it's like a sign of the apocalypse. He's made it back for Freaky Friday. But Tony, we've got about 4 minutes before the break. So I'll let you take us out and then we can come right back after that.
Well, I'm going to read one more piece of scripture here. And they asked him, saying, Master, but when shall these things be? And what sign will there be when these things shall come to pass? And he said, Take heed that ye be not deceived, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and the time draweth near. Go ye not therefore after them. But when ye shall hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified, for these things must first come to pass. But the end is not by and by. We have a little window of time, a little window of opportunity to turn to the Lord. And we're winding things up here, folks, and I'm just going to give a plug for our conference that's coming up, because we're going to be addressing these things. Kev Baker, myself, we have some notable speakers, guest speakers, on the September 16th and 17th, okay, just a week away. Registration's open at anthonypatch.com. We're going to be joined by Sidney Burns with his threat matrix. Our good friend I just mentioned, Alana Freeland, will talk about the space fence. Kathleen M. Urquhart will be speaking about the spirits, the spiritual side, from a Christian perspective, the spiritual side of what's going on in the world. Dane Wigington, of course, of geoengineeringwatch.org, will be talking about what's going on with terraforming of the planet. Our good friend and guest today, David Heavener, will be one of the speakers. Clyde Lewis from Ground Zero Radio. He will be speaking to the occult origins of science and high technology. And, of course, Kev Baker will be speaking as well. He'll be co-hosting with me, and I'll be covering things like artificial intelligence and 5G. And all of this is woven through the principles of The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And we take this from that architecture, if you will, of the art of war that is taught in the U.S. and many other war colleges around the world, certainly in China. And we'll be utilizing the principles and strategies from the art of war. But we call this, so we're going to be left with tip-of-the-spear information that none of these speakers, including myself and Kev, have not presented in the public arena. This will be brand new information. We'll lay a foundation just so that people have never heard the topics before. We'll have something to work from, but we're not going to be repeating things that we have had with all of these people on our shows and Clyde Lewis on his own show, Ground Zero Radio. We are going to bring new information because we are entering into a battlefield. We look at what's going on around the world. It's obvious that we're stepping into an arena that none of us have really been prepared for. And so the purpose of the conference is to prepare people spiritually, but arm them with tangible information as well from the technological side that we are, spending a lot of our shows talking about, Kevin and myself. So we're presenting really the powers that are at play and the principalities that are at play. And that's September 16th and 17th. These will be live stream webinars at anthonypatch.com. You can get the tickets for $10 a day just to cover our costs. Thank you very much. All right. Well, welcome back. This is Anthony Patch. My good buddy Kev Baker, Dr. Baker, by the way, is joining us today. Later on will be David Heavener in the second hour. And what we're going to shift gears into is talking about mind control. Now, we have on Monday for 9/11, Kev's good friend and guest will be Dr. Eric Karlstrom will be joining Kev. I'm going to hang out in the background just to add a little salt and pepper flavor to the show. But going to be Dr. Karlstrom's platform to talk about mind control and targeted individuals, which he also has the label of full spectrum dominance on that. And that, again, is something that we will be covering in our conference on the 16th and 17th of September. That's why we call it full spectrum dominance. And that's a military term that I'll define. You guys know that I like to define the terms that we banty about. And that relates to dominating the air, sea, and land on all aspects of the battlefield. And we are entering into a battlefield. And it also has to do with the dominance of the electromagnetic spectrum in all of its wavelengths. So it's appropriate that we talk about electromagnetism and mind control. And we have a series of articles here that Kevin and I have shared. I'm just going to give you the sources and the titles very quickly, and then we're going to backtrack to the beginning. The first one is from MIT Technology Review. This is memory implants. A maverick neuroscientist believes he has deciphered the code by which the brain forms long-term memories. The next article is coming out of New Scientist Live, $100 million project to make intelligence-boosting brain implant. The next one comes out of, this is the Daily Mail, and these are all recent articles. These just breaking news. This one is, could we soon implant memories into other people? Electrodes in the brain may make Star Trek-style mind melds a reality. Next article. This comes out of The Atlantic. Changing memories to treat PTSD. A controversial area of brain research suggests it may be possible, but is it ethical? Next one. This comes out of a blog. This is Synthetic Telepathy and Psychotronic Weapons Torture by 100,000 FBI and NSA secret spies. Now, this is kind of an old blog entry, but it gives a lot of great resources. This comes to us from 2007, so this is nothing new, folks. And this is a recent one from June of last year, Mind Control with Electromagnetic Frequency. This comes to us by LinkedIn through a researcher posting her own research paper. But what I'm getting at here, folks, is we have a commonality over many, many years of research into mind control, and specifically here we're talking about memory implants. Many of these articles I just cited came from a good friend of mine, Julie, who is a researcher that contributes some incredible articles from great sources. And that's why I always say that Kev and I are looking at their own papers. We go to the scientific journals, just as Julie has done here for us, and we look at what they're talking about in the scientific community between themselves, and then we share it with you, share the audience, the sources as well as the information. So let's kind of get into this. We're back at the beginning. We're back here with the MIT review. Memory implants. A maverick neuroscientist believes he's deciphered the code by which the brain forms long-term memories. Now, as to give you some context, Kevin and I have spent a lot of time talking about advancements in AI, the recursive neural network, the self-learning of deep machine learning, the self-teaching process, the Boltzmann machine. And so with that in mind, we move into talking about these things in terms of implanting chips and electromagnetism being used to trigger these chips, to implant information into the chips, thereby implanting information and control mechanisms into the human brain, and then the modeling of the human brain as a adjunct or parallel discussion of development, the modeling of the human brain for the purpose of advancing the structure and operational mechanisms of AI itself, out at that tip of the spear, that leading edge of AI that we have focused so much time on. So this comes out of the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. Now, I want to let you know, USC and Lockheed purchased the very first D-Wave computer, the 128 qubit, the first model, the 128 qubit D-Wave quantum computer. The first commercial model that was sold by D-Wave went to USC and Lockheed, in which they collaborated in opening a quantum research laboratory. Now they're talking about biomedicine and neurology coming out of USC in terms of electronic implants, supposedly to help recover victims' brain functions who suffered damage from Alzheimer's, from strokes. Now, they'll always go that direction. They'll say, oh, this is for the benevolent purposes. This is for treating things like Alzheimer's and strokes or injuries. And they call this disrupted neuronal. That's Neuronal, disrupted neuronal networks that they're treating, that they are trying to repair. What I'm getting at, folks, is they'll tell you on the surface it's for benevolent purposes, but all of this leads to what I just said. One, teaching the AI. Number two, it translates to mind control of the human race. And you put the two together, you have AI controlling the humans. Back to our Elon Musk discussion about us being rendered to the level of a house pet if we don't stay a step ahead of AI. Anyway, so Berger and his research partners have yet to conduct human tests on their neural prosthesis, but their experiments show how a silicon chip externally connected to a rat and monkey brains by electrodes can process information just like actual neurons. We're not putting individual memories back into the brain, he says. We're putting in the capacity to generate memories. So understand, this is the tip of the iceberg, folks. They're only telling you what they already have been doing. This is not in the future discussion. This is retrospective. Always take their articles and flip them 180 degrees, and you will see the truth. You'll see what's really going on. Here they talk about cracking the code. Berger often speaks in sentences that stretch to paragraph length and have many asides, footnotes, and complete diversions from the point. I ask him to define memory. Berger's definition is, it's a series of electrical pulses over time that are generated by a number of neurons. He says that it's important because you can reduce it to this and put it back into a framework. Not only can you understand it in terms of the biological events that happen, that means you can poke it, you can deal with it, you can put an electrode in there, and you can record something that matches your definition of a memory. You can find the 2,147,000 neurons that are part of this memory. And what do they generate? They generate this series of pulses. It's not bizarre, he says. It's something you can handle. It's useful. It's what happens. Anyway, I'm not going to read the whole article. What I'm saying to you is that when we have heard about targeted individuals, we've heard about mind control. I've published several articles, as has Kev Baker, in my magazine, Entangled Magazine. You can find it at anthonypatch.com and subscribe to it. I've broken down mind control into the quantum particles and the spin of quantum particles as to how you manipulate the memories, how you manipulate the data. Now understand, memory does not reside in the brain, despite what they will tell you. The brain only processes the data by modifying the spin of quantum particles within the tubulin dimers that make up the structure of the neurons. The memories reside in the database, otherwise known as DNA. Okay? So they're telling you they're manipulating memories and implanting memories in the brain. All they're doing is inserting data into the processor that otherwise would be data that would be drawn from the DNA and inserted and processed by the brain. But it is interesting that they're coming right out into the public domain and they're talking about brain implants, neuronal signals affecting the hippocampus, being able to send pulses into the hippocampus, hippocampus, into the cerebral cortex. That's where the higher thought process take place. When people have been talking about targeting of individuals and mind control, a lot of the general public want to just kind of yawn and roll their eyes and say, yeah, it's all science fiction. You guys are all a bunch of nutcakes. Well, the guys at MIT and USC, and I'll include D-Wave in there, seem to think that they're pretty well along, and I would agree with them, in the technological achievements, the hardware, if you will, of being able to control our minds. Kev, I'm going to stop there and let you jump in.
No, brilliant. And this guy, Theodore Berger, we can add him to the likes of Craig Venter because it describes him as a maverick neuroscientist. I'd prefer if they called him a maniac neuroscientist. And every article that I read here, Anthony, they all seem to link together, but the thing I took out of it was, aside from all the good stuff like they can treat Alzheimer's, PTSD, I'm starting to gain a better appreciation for just how well they have the human brain mapped. Now, this guy, Berger, and the next article we're going on to, which deals with the 100 million project to make intelligence-boosting brain implants, this features a gentleman called Brian Johnson. Now, he's actually working in collaboration with the University of Southern California and Berger. And what they're doing is they're looking at epileptic patients who have already got electrodes in their brain to stave off these fits that they can have, these epileptic fits. But what they're able to use these electrodes for as well is to read how the neurons are all firing off. And Tony, we've talked before about the quantum spin and the geometry of our thoughts, how all these kind of pathways link together, how they're hyperdimensional. And I would imagine it's relying heavily on the research of people like Brian Johnson and Theodore Berger to gain that understanding, to be able to know how this works. And they're saying here that in this second article that they're only months away from beginning new human studies. And then just to read this bit down here, it says Johnson has some big names advising him, including neuroengineer Ed Boyden at the MIT, who is known for his work on optogenetics, and, wait for it, Craig Venter, who is famous for creating synthetic life. This is like a kind of creepy cabal of scientists, Tony, who are trying to take us to human 2.0.
I agree with you. We have spent many shows talking about Dr. Craig Venter and his work in developing the digitized DNA, the sequencing of DNA, and his Center for Human Longevity, his center down in La Jolla, California, Southern California. Just to give people a basis for, what we're talking about here. Dr. Venter is certainly not the only one, and yet we have used him as a touch point in this discussion of modification of DNA. And now he is in here in talking about the modification and control of the human brain as well, the neuroscience of it. But optogenetics has to do with modifying our genes. So, of course, Dr. Venter would be in there. But optogenetics has also to do with the transmission of DNA memories, utilizing photons that carry that 0 and 1 binary, or even the ternary information that we've talked about, which is -1, 0, and 1, or the 0, 1, and 2 of ternary, resulting in, as you said, the geometry of memories, of information, being in a tetrahedral arrangement. But that is the carrying by photons of genetic information, memories, to the brain. And so, of course, Dr. Craig Venter would factor right in there because he's one of the leading researchers in genetics, certainly not the only one. But these guys are all working together because they know that you have to tie the DNA to the processor, the human brain. Go ahead, sir.
Absolutely. And just to go back and build upon this like we like to do, I mean, this article comes from New Scientist, and it's from a Jessica Hamzalu. And just catch the opening of this, because it says, if you could implant a device into your brain to enhance your intelligence, would you do it? A new company has just invested $100 million into developing such a device, and it's been advised by some of the biggest names in science. We just covered that. But the name of the company is very interesting as well, and this is Brian Johnson's company, and it's called Kernel. Now, that's Kernal, and anyone with a kind of basic knowledge of computing, that word should jump out at you straight away. And a kernel is a word used for a computer program that is at the core of the computer's operating system. Now, we've often spoke about the brain being our kind of processor, our computer, and here we are here, this company now that are basically looking to hack into it and improve it. This is exactly what they're calling their company, the Kernel. I think there's something kind of bizarre about that. But he has spent a kernel.
A kernel of knowledge? Go ahead.
That's it. And he says he spent many years wondering how to best contribute to humanity. Quote, I arrived at intelligence. I think it's the most precious and powerful resource in existence. And his goal is for human intelligence to expand and develop in the same way that artificial intelligence has in recent years. Now, just one more bit I want to read out here, and it says, people with memory disorders, for example, due to a traumatic experience or aging, are intended to be the first people to test such a prosthesis. I hate that word. And it goes on to, and this is the bit that really got me.
Try anthropomorphic.
Oh, anthropomorphic.
There you go.
I like that one. I practiced that one. But get this, because this Johnson guy says the first superhumans, that's right, the first superhumans are to be those who have deficits to start with. So here they are, Tony, talking about superhumans now. Human 2.0. This is the road we're going down. And you were addressing the mind control thing there just a moment ago, how people roll their eyes and things. And I suppose when MK Ultra was running its course back in the day, people would have been exactly the same. They'd have heard these rumors and thought, oh my word, these people are off their trolleys. But maybe 20, 30 years down the line, as stuff gets declassified, we're going to be proven right, because this is all going to come out in the wash eventually, Tony. And people in the future will be looking back at this time, probably scratching their heads thinking, what on earth were they thinking?
Yeah, if they have a brain to scratch their head and wonder independently, because this is all moving towards the hive mentality, pulling everybody into an AI-controlled mind control system. So I'm going to read a little more from this because it really sums it up very nicely, because we have talked about algorithms relating to AI and the use of algorithms to develop the processes in which AI functions. So hang on to that word algorithms, folks, because here we go. The paragraph says, what next? The $100 million from Johnson's own pocket will be spent on developing such a device. They're talking about the implants. Ideally, it will be as tiny and easy to implant as possible, while being able to record or stimulate multiple neurons. The team is also working on ways to develop, hold on to it, to develop personalized algorithms. I'm going to translate for you. Personalized algorithms is mind control. Go look at my articles on mind control in the Entangled magazine, issue number 3 and issue number 4. That is September and August, all over this stuff. And I'm great. I'm grateful that Dr. Karlstrom's going to be on Monday, because this factors right into what he's talking about as well. Personalized algorithms mean these are designer mathematical processes by which they will control the mind through these implants. And they're telling us that right here. My and Kev's duty is to read these to you and translate and put into context what they're saying, to develop personalized algorithms. Go ahead, sir.
I mean, Tony, just to really emphasize the point, this isn't going to be one algorithm fits all. This is personalized, a set of rules that dictate normal brain functions for an individual. So it's going to be
dictate. Right there in the article. Dictate normal brain function for an individual. That is mind control. That is programming the brain. It's right out here in our face. Go ahead.
No, it really is. I mean, that's the bit that jumped out at me there, because the fact that they're tailoring it to individuals, it's not just one algorithm that they can unleash. They are looking at all of our brains, because they need to examine the individual's brain to work out that unique algorithm for that specimen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, people want to think that we make things up when we speak in terms of woo and conjecture, but we always go to the sources. We always go and read what they're putting out and saying to one another, and how proud they are. They're hubris. They're just putting it out there, folks. The hubris of these people thinking that this is a good thing to do. Now, unfortunately, they pick on people who have brain damage, Alzheimer's, injuries, traumatic injuries. They're the guinea pigs, folks. They're the lab rats. They say it's because they're trying to help these victims. Okay, but they're using them because the end goal is control of you and me. This is not fear mongering. This is not being, hyping things up. I'm just trying to be very emphatic with you here that they're in our faces telling us they want to connect us to computers and control us. They're already doing it remotely. They're already doing it through the 5G system that we spent months talking about, and it's only going to be enhanced even further. So this is where we're moving. If you don't believe that 5G is the system by which remote electromagnetic millimeter wave signals are projected to your brain to change the spin of the quantum particles in your brain, resulting in memories being changed, your history being changed, your daily thought processes being modified, and your sense of the future all modified. You will no longer have independent thought. You will no longer have that sentient self-awareness of your individuality, because you will be part of the hive mentality. This is what we're talking about when we bring in the experts on the 16th and 17th of September from their specific areas as subject matter experts to talk about the tip of the spear, leading edge information that you have to have in order to enter the battlefield that we're already engaged in. So we're reinforcing by bringing these articles to you today, Kevin, myself, what we will be revealing even more about on the 16th and 17th. Go ahead, Kev. I sound like I'm doing an infomercial here.
No, what gets me is the fact that they speak about this as enhancements. An enhancement, really, on that perfect brain that we have inside our heads already? This is no enhancement. This is hacking. It's hijacking. And before we know it, Tony, how do we even know if we're still having our own thoughts at that point? I know that sounds a bit fearful out there, but when they're able to manipulate us right down to the neural level, I mean, it's hard to tell if maybe they have tampered with you or not. And a lot of people are experiencing Mandela effects. And that's all part of this PSYOP as well, because that's all tests, and it's all leading to this matrix, this hive mind that we're all moving into.
Absolutely. The last article, just to wrap it up real fast, from The Atlantic, Changing Memories to Treat PTSD. A controversial area of brain research suggests it may be possible, but is it ethical? In other words, if they're going to replace memories, that's no different than what's going on with the Mandela effect. Mandela effect is the tip of the iceberg of how our minds will be changed in the future. You can say what you want about the Mandela effect. You can call it hype about nothing. They're giving us the information about what's coming already. So again, you need to get right with the Lord. The only defense to this is the Holy Spirit. The full armor of God is the only way to protect, literally, physiologically, particle science, quantum particle science level protection comes from the Holy Spirit. It actually modifies and shields your DNA. It changes the frequency of your DNA. It makes your DNA impervious to 5G intrusion if you have the Holy Spirit indwelling within you, and you become the temple of the Holy Spirit in which it resides, and you walk with the Lord. You've got to come to a point of anguish where you say, enough is enough. I'm not in control. God's in control. I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going to be a soldier. I am enlisting in the army. I'm not talking about guns and knives. I'm talking about spiritual warfare. I'm talking about using the word that's in the Bible. That's the truth. We got to go to break. Coming up, David Heavener on the other side.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back, ladies and gents. Another week has gone by, and your two favourite quantum physicists, we're back with you. That's right, I'm the co-host tonight, Kev Baker, and you are in the right place at the right time for the Anthony Patch Show. And as the theme music says there, Anthony Patch definitely is the man in the know. So let's waste no time tonight. You ain't here to hear me. Tony, how you doing, man?
Very good, Dr. Baker. How's Dr. Baker feeling these days?
Dr. Baker is feeling rather good today. Raring to go, Tony. I've been looking forward to this show all night. In particular, especially when you informed me that the brilliant David Heavener, our friend, is going to be back with us in hour number 2, right?
He is. David Heavener is a Hollywood producer, and he has produced over 40 films in his history. We've had him on a couple of times. We're going to speak with him in the second hour about his upcoming television series, The Last Evangelist. And it is kind of it's a crime. It's a CSI based on a Christian theme, a Christian genre, if you will, but an intriguing concept, not only because it's Christian-based, but because he's really trying to make it a realistic television series in terms of the characters and what they represent, their morals, their struggles. I want to call it something that is more like a docudrama, perhaps, is the way I would look at it.
Yeah, almost like a kind of reality drama.
Yeah, that's a better way to say it, or more of a reality drama. Yeah.
Every time he comes on, Anthony, I mean, I'm always blown away because obviously he's working tirelessly on The Last Evangelist, and we get a little more each time he comes on. And I don't know about any of the listeners out there. I mean, everyone knows I like to go and absorb the programming from that square box at the end of the room, the television. And, you know, a show like David is putting together is utterly unique. We've all seen these crime dramas, but never with the spin that David's putting on it. And at this time we're living in now, Tony, it could never be more timely.
Yeah, he has invited you and myself to be technical, I don't want to say experts, but advisors to the television series, because he really wants to incorporate high technology into the storylines. And so it is very timely. It's very up to date and modern. And in that respect, we have a venue, Kev, you and I, to take. I'll let you do that. Go ahead.
I'll reconnect you, Tony, because you've kind of lagged out a little bit there. But yeah, just during the week there. Now, as you know, Anthony Patch is very much my mentor. And we had noticed these big X9, X10 type flares coming off the sun. Now, I'd been listening to our good friend Clyde Lewis, and a poor listener had phoned up in a bit of a panic because they'd been watching YouTube, and I believe they lived in the Florida region. And one of these YouTubers was absolutely putting the fear of God into them because They were making out that these solar flares would absolutely supercharge an already monster storm. So I took to the email. I thought, I know who I'll ask about this, Mr. Patch. And he came back to me, and his very first 2 words, or 4 words, shall I say, was more tectonic in nature. Now, he went on to explain a lot more after that, Anthony, but obviously, after today's 8.1 earthquake in Mexico, I think you're very justified to have gone the tectonic route as opposed to supercharging any storm.
Yeah, and I think it's just looking at the basic physics. If we look at particle physics, which is what we're really discussing when we're looking at flares coming off of the sun, these are charged particles.
It's really encouraging to see that David is going to such lengths, not just on the technology with us, Tony, but other people he's calling on too, to get the very cutting edge information and have that in his actual series as well.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll share some more with us today, later on in the show. We have some other things to cover, so we'll let David speak for himself, but we're just letting you know, as a very informed and educated audience, that we greatly appreciate that there's more coming your way that Kevin and I are honored to be a part of. And so that's kind of the teaser, but I'm sure we'll fill you in more as it progresses.
So, Tony, where are we starting tonight? Because let's face it, we can take our pick. There's so much going on in the world right now. So I'm going to hand it over to you to see just where we're going to go with this.
Well, there is. And, it's a great time to be in radio, a great time to be in television, because there's nothing lacking for content. The subject matter out there can't get any more dramatic and certainly not any more tragic than what we've been seeing with these hurricanes. And now we had an 8.4 earthquake just off the coast in the southern portion of Mexico last night. So,
well, I'm going to blow your trumpet for you.
Okay.
And I'll
let you to an entirely new audience. The information that we've been sharing that would never see the light of day on a mainstream media television show. And so he is taking the step of setting up a network, and he will be broadcasting on Roku TV, Amazon, Android. So he is really putting together as a content provider himself, but also bringing in other people that have content that are subject matter experts for shows in which they will be sharing educational information as well as entertainment. So it's really a good mix, and I applaud him for his tireless efforts in pulling together an independent network for television purposes. And there's a natural marriage, if you will, of TFR, thanks to Chris Geo and his generosity and his collaboration with David Heavener in providing content from TFR over to the David Heavener television network, as it is entitled, the David Heavener TV. So this is going to be really an excellent evolution for TFR as well.
It really is. And I mean, I watch a lot of these B-movie disaster films and stuff like that. And there's a lot of the stuff, especially the science that we talk about. However, when you start to dig into the detail, they never quite have it right. So